Here we go.
I'm a multimillionaire and I don't own my house and I don't invest in any property. But why? Isn't a house a great investment? Isn't buying property a great place to put your money? And surely it's better than throwing your money away on rent, right? Well, when you run the numbers, that's actually often wrong. And
This is where Rami and I disagree. I love Rami. I used to read his books that would teach you how to be rich, and I think that there's a lot of things you can learn from financial literacy from there. But this is significantly controversial for me.
saying this for years on my podcast, in my book, even on my Netflix show. You've been lied to about buying property. And in this video, I'm going to break down once and for all the 4 main parts that you need to know so that by the end, you'll have a clear idea of the true cost of buying a house and what you should do. Starting with Part 1, the dream you've been sold. What is the American dream? If you're like most people, you picture a single family home with a white picket fence and 2.5 kids and a dog. Think about it. That is not an accident. Where did that dream come from? That dream is the result of decades of marketing. Some people might even call it propaganda, including from one of the most corrupt organizations in the world, the National Association of Realtors. They just had $1 billion+ judgment filed against them, by the way. Let me explain what I mean. Most people in the world do not live in single family homes like we do in America, and yet we believe this is the only measure of success. Next up, think about the numbers themselves. Decades ago, your parents' generation, certainly their parents, a house would cost roughly 2.5x your annual income. People would put down 20%, and the total monthly payments would be about or less than 30% of your gross income, which includes mortgage, maintenance, insurance, taxes, all of it. Let me give you an example with some real numbers. If you make $50,000 a year, gross income before taxes, that means that your house would cost $125,000. Do you know any houses right now that you'd want to live in for $125,000?
There are houses where you could live in for $125,000, but that's not the case. Come on.
In that same example of $50K a year income, you'd put $25,000 down, and your total monthly payments would be $1,250 per month. Have you ever seen a house like that in your entire lifetime? No, things are different now, and yet we are still operating on these old rules that have been passed down to us without taking into account how things have changed. And this still doesn't explain the craziness of people who buy houses for 5 times, 10 times their salary with 3% down. And I'm telling you this because if you buy something you cannot afford, it might seem like you are buying your way into the American dream, but oftentimes it will come around and bite you in the ass. Which brings us to Part 2. The myths about owning a home. There are 4 main myths about home ownership, and I want you to know each of them. Myth number 1, prices in real estate always go up. No, they don't. You would think people understand this after the 2008 recession, but there are powerful forces at play to get you to forget about this, such as...
Okay, so everybody refers to the 2008 crash of real estate, and yeah, there was a crash. But if you look at real estate like you look at the stock market, it is a long-term investment. So when you look at the stock market, for the last 25 years that we had the stock market, there's been fluctuations up and down. And then you could say that in the stock market, there is even more volatility than the real estate market. Historically, over the last 200 years, there's only been like 5 to 6 crashes of the real estate market, which created a decline on price values over 30% across nationwide, up to 50% in some markets. But when you look about the stock market and you look at instances where we had a bear market, you have seen a decline of 20% of the stock market significantly more often than in real estate. So if you compare them, you have both charts and you compare them, you can say that real estate is a less volatile investment than the stock market, for sure.
As the National Association of Realtors, your family, even the government, all encouraging you to buy a house. Remember, many things appear to always get more expensive. That is the result of inflation. But in real estate, which is opaque, landlords will often discount the number of months you can pay. They'll do rate buy downs. They will do all kinds of things to avoid reducing the price while secretly reducing the price to keep up the myth that buying a house always goes up. Myth number 2, the value of a house doubles every 10 years. This isn't always true. And even when the price does double, most people forget to factor in phantom costs.
So it is not true that the house, doubles in 10 years. But what it is true is that across the nation, you can expect a fairly appreciation rate of 4%. There is some markets in which you don't, but fairly over the course of the years, you can appreciate about 4% of the price. So over 10 years, you can expect at least somewhere vicinity of like 48 to like 58% of appreciation. So not quite doubling the value, but pretty close if you were to ask me.
Phantom costs are all the costs of a house that most people forget about. They're phantoms. They include things like closing costs, taxes, property insurance, maintenance, repairs, even the gas to drive to Home Depot that you use, and your time, and of course, the cost, the opportunity cost of that down payment and what you could have made if you simply invested it in an S&P 500 index fund. In fact,
so I don't understand why he calls it phantom cost, because they're not unexpected. They're not surprising. Maybe they're scary, but if you're buying a house and you're making this financial huge step in your life, which is pretty big because, houses are not cheap, but if you're buying a house, then you should know that just like when you're buying a car, there's going to be some maintenance required. There's going to be some repairs required. Just like you put gas into your car, you take it to the dealership for any kind of maintenance whatsoever. You rotate the tires, or you have to buy new tires every 4 years or whatever. The same thing with the house. Like the main ticket items that you will see, something like a roof, something like a HVAC machine, something like a water heater machine, something like plumbing. You would have to understand that these are components that you're going to spend money on it. Just like you should be able to understand that in order to build some kind of financial stability, you need an emergency fund. You need a sinking fund for things that are going to happen. Let's say your car gets into an accident. You have insurance, you have great insurance, but you still have a deductible to cover. Same thing with the house. There will be a deductible to cover when something happens inside a house. So I wouldn't agree in calling these phantom costs. It would just be like under maintenance and repairs, which you should be aware that these happen, and they may happen, back to back. They may happen twice. A roof lifetime is like 30 years. Water heater is 10 to 15 years. HVAC system, 10 to 15 years. But yeah, be aware of those.
It's actually quite common that you could sell your house for a higher price than you paid for it and still lose money when you factor in all the phantom costs. Remember, it is not simply the bigger number minus the smaller number pops out profit. That's not how it works. You got to factor in all those phantom costs to get your true profit. Myth number 3, you can use leverage to increase your money. This is partially true, and homeowners often point to leverage as a key benefit. You can put $20,000 down for a $100,000 house. If the house climbs to $120K, you effectively doubled your money. That is true, but remember this, leverage works on the way up as well as the way down. If your house declines by 10%, you don't just lose 10% of your equity. In fact, you can be wiped out. So it is important to remember that house prices don't only go up, house values don't only go up, and leverage can work for you or it can work against you. Myth number 4.
So leverage, leverage is a great thing when you understand how to invest your money. So leverage meaning, like for example, here in America, you can buy a house with 3% down, meaning like if you buy a house for $100K, you can buy it for $3,000 down, which is significantly more doable than doing it outside of the country. So like if you go to somewhere like Canada, if you go somewhere like Mexico, you go to South America, Europe even, you cannot buy a house for 3% down. You will have to pay significantly amount of down, 30%, 40% in some cases. And then when you put you put that down payment, you're still subjected to a mortgage. They may not even be fixed. So the fact that we have availability to buy a house with as little 3% down is unheard of any other countries. But that is the powerful leverage. Leverage, if you're living in your house and you're not selling, then the fact that the price went down in your house does not affect you at all, right? Because you only lose money if you sell. Let's say that you bought a house with 3% down, and after a year or 2 years, then you would be able to, need to move or something happens, you get divorced, you sell the house. Yeah, there is a potential of that to be lost money. But for example, if you profit from that case instead of lose money, if you sell for a profit, for example, that money now becomes non-taxable. So that's another pretty powerful thing about real estate, which like if you're primary residence, if your primary residence and you're single file, you are able to claim $250,000 tax free. So you don't have to pay taxes of the sale of your primary home up to $250,000. Tell me anywhere else that you won't be able to pay taxes for that. And it's up to $500K if you're married. So $500K if you're married, completely tax-free for the sale of your primary if you do profit that, of course, right? But not only that, like House ownership has been significantly correlated with increase in income, increase in education, and increase in wealth. About 60% of the people in America own their own homes. So when we look at the comparison of household income on one people that own versus one people that rent, you see the consistency. The household income of somebody who owns about $78,000 per year, and compared to $40,000 per year with somebody who rents, as well as their net worth. The net worth is about of somebody who owns about $400K on average. This is average data, median data, okay? And compared to $10,000 of somebody who rents.
I can deduct my mortgage interest from my taxes and save a bunch of money. Look, tax savings are great, but most people forget that they are saving money that they ordinarily never would have spent. As they put it, you don't spend $1 to save a dime. In many, many cities, the amount you pay for owning a house is much more than you would pay to rent an equivalent house, especially once you factor in all the phantom costs. And remember, those tax deductions that everybody talks about, they were reduced even further in 2018, so I would not count on this. When you ask people, for example, what tax deductions, they often go, oh, your tax deductions. I go, what tax deductions? Most people have no idea what a tax deduction even is, much less which ones apply to their housing situation. Okay.
What are the tax deductions? So when you get a loan to pay for a house that you're living in, there is a mortgage, right? And your mortgage usually includes your principal and your interest. So the payment that you have is conjugated by principal and interest. So the interest that you get on that loan over the course of 1 year, depending on your amortization schedule, is what you get to write off. So in the example of me, I get about $14,000 per year of deduction just from that interest deduction of my mortgage. And on top of that, I also get to deduct my property taxes. So if you pay property taxes and state taxes, they all go into the same bucket. So I live in California, I have, high property tax and property tax is not that bad as compared to other states, but a high state income tax. So when you calculate, for example, now in 2025, there used to be a cap in how much state taxes you can deduct, but now the cap has been increased according to SALT and the Big Beautiful Bill. So that cap has increased to $40,000. So if you live in a higher cost of living city, now you get to deduct even more taxes, which, given or taken, you would probably want to know about that.
Now that we've learned to look past the housing propaganda and understand some of these myths, what do we need to do next? Well, that takes us to part 3. Always run the numbers. Have you heard this phrase? If you rent, you're just throwing your money away, or you're paying your landlord's mortgage. I got a question for you. Would you say the same thing about eating out? Would you say, you're paying the restaurant owner's mortgage when you eat that sushi? No. So why is it that just rolls off our tongue when it comes to housing? That's because somebody invented that phrase and now it's in the zeitgeist. And we...
Okay, so this is hilarious to me because nobody has invented the price. That phrase it is true. If you you rent an apartment in a building that was, let's say new construction, chances are that building has a mortgage, and chances are that you are paying that building's mortgage and more. So it's not something invented, it's something that happens every day. I don't understand that whole concept. Unless the person, the developer, the constructor of the building owns the whole property cash, which, the more that you know about real estate, the less benefits you get for owning something cash. Unless that happens, then you're actually not paying somebody's mortgage, but you more than often than not, you're actually paying somebody's mortgage. So it's not made up. I don't understand that.
We resent that we might be paying somebody else's mortgage, but we don't resent when we go and buy paper towels and pay someone else's mortgage because we're paying for value. Now, this is really important. I want you to pay close attention, especially when you are talking about high cost of living cities like New York, LA, San Francisco, 3 cities I have lived in. Buying can be way more expensive than renting. In fact, it might not make financial sense at all. I'll give you an example. When I was living in New York City, I kept a very close eye on real estate. I was renting a nice place and I saw that there was a unit right next door. Same view, same square footage, same number of bedrooms and bathrooms, and I tracked it. It would have cost me 2.2 times more to own than what I was paying in rent. Let's just say I was paying $3,000 a month in rent. It would have cost me $6,600 a month to own an equivalent property. You know what I did instead? I said, first of all, I like renting. If I have a problem, I just text my landlord. And second, I took the $3,600 extra dollars I would have spent owning and I just invested it in the market. And guess what? I made more money doing that renting and investing the difference than I would have owning. No Home Depot.
I agree with him. Like in some cases, like living in LA, San Francisco, New York, you probably would be better off renting than owning because it would make sense for your financial situation. Because I'm not going to ask you to go buy a house if you cannot afford it, right? The metric that you should follow is, and what he has mentioned in the past is that if it's exceeding 30% of your gross income, then you probably should not be able to buy the house. But some banks would allow you to go up to 40% or 45% of your gross income. Would that be advice? I don't know if that would be advice. You do have to know that housing probably is going to be one of the largest chunks of your income, what's going to take away from your income. But when he says, I saved $3,000 from not buying that same exact condo or apartment in New York, yes, but he's also assuming that his rent is never going to go up. And I don't know what planet you're living. If you are going to be living in an apartment that the rent never goes up, specifically, and even in rent control places, you have like a cap. It's like 4% that the rent does go up every single year. So I don't understand that particularly.
Depot trips, no renovations, no problems with the faucet, just living my life, texting my landlord, sitting back on the weekends and chilling, and investing $3,600 per month in the market. Look, I'm not saying your financial situation will be exactly the same, but if you buy a house without opening up a spreadsheet and entering some numbers, you are making a huge mistake. I want you to run the numbers. I want you to look at the home you're thinking of buying and calculate the true cost. That includes property tax, which will go up, maintenance costs, which are unpredictable but still need to be factored in, even the $25,000 roof repair that's going to happen 11 years from now. You need to properly account for that now. Mortgage payments, opportunity costs. Use this to work out the real monthly payment of owning a house. And then compare that number to the cost of renting a similar property. If owning is considerably more, then financially speaking, it might make sense to rent and invest the difference. On the other hand, you might discover that it makes great financial sense to own. If that's the case, God bless. But I want you to understand these numbers before you make the biggest purchase of your life. Now, what about property as an investment vehicle? What about buying a property and renting it out? Well, I will say that it can work, but you've got to really know your numbers. And in my experience, most landlords do not even know their own basic numbers, much less are they able to properly plan and set aside money and treat owning a property as a business. In fact,
so in this particular thing, yes, when you're buying an investment property and then you're planning to run a business, because it is a business, real estate is a business. So not knowing your numbers can kill you. Of course, like even if you run any type of business in any type, let's say you manufacture some wheels and you're planning to sell them on Amazon, you have to run the numbers to know at what price you will be able to profit and how much it's going to cost for your supply and manufacture and delivery. And you have to know your numbers. So if you don't know how to run your numbers, find communities that are investing in the same area that you're investing. Go on YouTube like you're doing right now. You're watching this video. Talk to other people that have been doing it successfully, and it's not just like willy-nilly just going into like, oh, I'm just gonna become a real estate investor, but I haven't done any research. Read books like The Millionaire Next Door, which says that about 90% of millionaires have real estate in their portfolio. Read books like Investing in Real Estate. Read books like Financial Freedom for the Lazy Person. And then well-versed, because if you're going to a business without knowing anything about the business, then you most likely are not going to succeed. So,
in fact, in my experience, over half of the people who write to me in financial trouble are there because of one of two things: their housing costs or how much they spend on their cars. So buying a house should be thought of as a purchase first, a very expensive purchase, and an investment second. Why? Why do you need to think about your house as a purchase, not an investment? Let me tell you, there are two reasons. First, the problem of risk. If your house is your biggest investment, then how diversified is your portfolio? Think about it. If you're paying $2,000 a month to a mortgage, are you investing $6,000 a month elsewhere to balance your risk? Of course not. Second, real estate in general offers a pretty poor return for individual investors. Yale economist Robert Shiller found that from 1915 through 2015, home prices increased on average only 0.6% per year. I know this sounds...
We'll put a chart right here that composes this research. Is kind of like one out of many, but we'll continue.
Crazy, but it is true. Go look at the data. Now, if you want to grow your wealth, my suggestion would be first, invest in a 401k. Go with index funds. Let them compound over time. If at some point you want to add in property as an investment, sure, part of a well-diversified portfolio. If you
I do agree with this. Majority of us are W2 employees and we're not business owners because not everybody can be an entrepreneur, right? But majority of people that we are entering the workforce and we're, trying to live for the next, 30, 40 years, you do have to plan for retirement. You do have to take advantage of the accounts that you can easily open, like a 401k, like a Roth IRA, like an HSA, they're gonna benefit you in the terms of HSA, like triple tax benefits there. But I would suggest you start with these accounts as well too.
Ever a good idea. I want to make sure nobody misunderstands me, because a lot of people have accused me of saying you should never buy a house. That's not true. In fact, I will buy a house myself one day. And as I said, it's going to be a terrible financial decision, but I'm going to do it anyway. What I am against is poor financial decisions and simply following what everyone else is doing without.
So if it's a terrible financial decision, then why is he going to do it? I don't know. That sounds a little contradictory.
Ever running the numbers. So how am I planning ahead to buy a house? Well, here are 5 questions I'm asking myself, and I recommend you do the same. Question: not buy a house if you were thinking it's going to be a magic way to get rich, because for many people, question number 4, am I okay if the value of my house goes down? Well, you about buying. Do you know how many people
Okay, so for his questions, would I live there for the next 10 years? Okay, I don't think this is particularly significantly necessary to live in a house, because if you are purchasing a house, like he says, for purchase only reasons and not as an investment, then you probably are going to live somewhere, right? And if you don't have a job that you're moving to constantly, or that you're not going to stay in a city for a very long time, then you probably shouldn't buy there. But I don't think 10 years is something that you should lock yourself into. Like, I would say something like between 2 to 5 years. Will my total monthly housing cost be less than 28% of my gross income? I would say that this is probably accurate. If your house mortgage is taking more than 30% of your gross income, then you probably are going to be suffering a little bit with that mortgage, and you're gonna have to cut down on investing, cut down on other things. Have I saved 20% for a down payment? So for that particular thing, I do not agree. So in the United States, it's one of the countries, I think the only country where you can buy a house for less than 20% down. And you can buy a house for like a 30-year fixed interest mortgage. So if you go to Canada and then you go to Mexico and you go to South America, then you have to put significantly more money in in order for you to buy a house. And not only that, you have to agree to a variable interest mortgage, not a fixed interest mortgage. So in the United States, this is a huge benefit. I would suggest you take advantage of it. Would it be ideal to put 20% down? Yes, it would be ideal. Am I okay if the value of the house goes down? Right. So if you're not moving, if you don't have to sell, if you're not forced out of your house, if nothing is going on, then you should be okay with the value of the house going down. Again, got to mention that there's been 5 to 6 crashes maybe in the last 200 years of real estate. So significantly, how much is your house going down to? But let's move on. Am I excited about buying? Yes, you should be excited about buying. Not only you're getting an asset, you're building towards your future, you're getting something paid off. After 30 years, you have most likely an asset that has probably doubled in 30 years in price, and you can give that up to your offspring, your kids, or whatever you need. But in a nutshell, I think this video just derails people from trying to get into real estate. And then people are not saying it's not hard. It is hard. Things that you need to work on, like businesses or investments, are not of the weak-minded, right? You have to pour some work into it. It is not as easy as putting money away into the stock market and just seeing it compound. Even though the stock market does compound, it takes 20 to 30 years in order for you to build any kind of wealth through there. But I've seen people retire from the rental income from the rental houses. So what it's I guess attracted me to real estate is the ability to be able to make that transition maybe 5 to 10 years and be able to retire or have enough income to live for the rest of your life. But if you want to continue to see these videos, please do like and follow and subscribe to my channel.